Hi and hello and good afternoon, everybody. This is this afternoon's session. Thank you very much for joining in. As you know, this afternoon's session is all about the challenges of the industry and the communicating and the rolling out and our sense of the implications for the industry of some pretty serious, government proposals or ambitions around building back better and leveling up that emerged over the course of the last 2 years or so, and really building on the aspects of what we've been talking about at the conference so far. We'll get going in about another minute or so. We just allow everyone to get signed in and ready as we go. Just a quick reminder for this afternoon, just a quick reminder, please, this afternoon, if you could endeavor to ask any questions in the Q&A and sorry, questions in the chat toe. Put them in the chat toe. That's probably easiest for us all, just to pick up on those. And remember, don't attempt to necessarily answer the questions of other people. Leave the panelists to address those, or rather than us get 17,000 comments going in there all at once. That would be hugely helpful. Okay, so we're approaching about 2 minutes after the posting in time. Numbers are still building up slightly, so I'm just going to pause a little bit just to get everybody a chance to get in there. And we'll be going in a short while. Just want to remind folks that the overall awards, the Streetworks Awards, apart from the Chairman's Award, will be going out on Twitter and our other social media at 5 p.m. this afternoon. So set your notifications up to receive that as we get closer to tea time would be good. All right, excellent. Okay, well, look, we're going to get started now then. It gives me great pleasure this afternoon to kick off this final session of our two-day conference, building on the overall theme that we have had in terms of decarbonization and the implications of change at the moment for us as an industry. And I hope you've enjoyed this morning, where the Future of the Roadwork session, Road Network session, I think was very well displayed and very well brought to the fore, and some really good conversation, actually building in some different themes during the breakout sessions at lunchtime from those that were heard before, on both safety in the context of safe people and but also in the context of a safe planet, and how those two gel together, and the importance of us picking up those. But this afternoon now we turn ourselves to attention really of the focusing in on the challenges to our industry of some of the more serious government policies, the things to do that will affect us around building back better, the major infrastructure program of the government, and also the leveling up agenda. It's interesting really because I want to introduce the panelists to you in a second, who've generously given of their time this afternoon. But I've in particular be asking them later on, in this aspect of the parliamentary process. We've got, parliaments only last for 5 years, don't they? Utilities are here for tens and tens of years. And that, of course, is our endemic challenge to steer a course of these gentlemen who are on the call this afternoon, for us to think through those difficult things. I'm reminded of a conversation just yesterday evening, for example, of the transformative effect that government can have on things just by relatively minor aspects of policy. The one I'm thinking of particularly the other evening was one to do with apprentices. The Cameron government came in, and suddenly a number of apprentices went up from 300,000 to nearly 900,000 over the course of that parliament. And then Cameron departs and it comes back down again. And that is a little bit to do with the context of why this is on the agenda for this afternoon. But look, without more ado, let me introduce to you, first of all, Howard Foster, centre right on my screen. Howard, who's the Chief Operating Officer from Cadent, and been absolutely instrumental in taking through a lot of the thinking on that beside Steve Fraser. And secondly, but not least, Keith Hazlitt, Group Water Director from Northumbrian Water. Gentlemen, extremely warm welcome to you both from the energy and from the water sectors with this afternoon. And then top left on my screen, for those of you who haven't had a chance to put a face to a name, but from our Secretariat, Streetworks Secretariat and working with WA Communications, Peter Jones, who's a Director of Communications for WA, sorry, for Streetworks UK, but is a Director of WA. And I'm not saying centres on the Westminster bubble, but certainly noodles over quite a lot of that stuff that's coming and going on a daily basis. Although, you know, just for our membership to be aware, you know, we are very conscious and need to become increasingly focused on, should we say, the mayoral activities and the and those things that are happening, not least by the divide of the topics that we're talking about here this afternoon. For those of you who are a little bit late to join, just want to mention, please do put any questions you want into the chat tote. That's the center left button to the left of the green button on the bottom one. If you want to draw that one up, and please pop any questions that you want to in there. I would be remiss of me not to draw attention to our sponsors for this afternoon's session. One Dot Network, who interestingly have done quite a lot of work with you, Howard, I know, and indeed we're talking about that a little earlier on this afternoon, and have been providing, I know, a stellar service to many of our members. Also partnered, as it happens, with Scube, who are our sub-sponsors for this afternoon as well. Well, look, without more ado, then, if I could firstly then really just invite Howard, if you'd like to kick us off this afternoon, really by giving your own reflections upon perhaps some of the things that are in your in tray that are, you know, might be of interest to, you know, Streetworks colleagues in terms of the activities that surround and how you tend to think about Build Back Better. I mean, is it merely just something that has a 2 to 3 year horizon? And then also perhaps give us some thoughts on leveling up and what it really means for and certainly for an organization which is geographically pitched where you are, is something that that is probably of quite a significant investment proposal focus, if nothing else. But Howard, in the first case, let me push it across to you.
Okay. Thank you, Clive, and firstly, afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion. As Clive said, for those who joined late, I'm Howard Forster. I'm Chief Operating Officer at Kane. I'm assuming many of you will have come across Kane, but for those who haven't, Kane is the largest gas distribution company in the UK. We serve 11 million homes and businesses to about 125,000 kilometres of pipeline. So of the 8 licensed areas within the UK, we operate 4 of those. So from North London all the way through to south end of Cumbria, running across the UK. So yeah, a big organisation, and really look forward to the discussion in the context of what we're up to. Interesting, I joined Kane in 2019, having previously worked as Operations Director of Northern Gas prior to that. And I joined a few months prior to the December 2019 general election, which of course saw the government elected stated this ambition around levelling up, subject to the conversation this afternoon in the UK. And of course, as we all are aware, 3 months later, COVID hit. So words like lockdown, Teams, Zoom that we're on today entered our collective vocabularies. And of course, Building Back Better joined levelling up as a key government aspiration, combined with that which was stated in the 2019 general election. I in many ways see those two things together, but perhaps touch on that a little later. Fair to say it was a quiet first year, not at all. But I think importantly, in COVID, was very powerful, and it allowed me personally to reflect on the essential role we play in keeping our country moving, and the importance of which is for many people who were rightly moving back to working from home, some into furlough. Our industry, speaking to utility colleagues obviously here today, our industry continued to work and worked out every day and worked hard to keep the utility networks operating. Of course, essential in supporting the UK to work from home and to live through the challenging months that we faced through COVID. I will state, we didn't furlough a single worker. I think testament to the essential nature of the work activities we do, and I'm sure Keith would add to that with the water sector. So when Clive, to your question, levelling up and building back better and the role Cadent play, and I guess my observations. To many, levelling up seems really more about, and I think probably in the initial narrative was more about new housing, perhaps big transport infrastructure projects. But actually, interestingly, Michael Gove, if you heard his presentation, Secretary of State, referred to levelling up and sort of perhaps offered a new definition of that, and that was making opportunity more equal across the country. So this is an agenda I am absolutely certain, and many people attending and around the table here today are well placed to support. At Cadent, we're working closely with government, particularly on their ambitions for net zero transition. And for me, I think there are two areas where the utility sector plays a major contribution in building back better and levelling up with for me, two issues that are particularly close to my heart. The first of those is skills, and the second is a just transition, which does not leave people behind. And let me just talk for a minute or two about each of those. Firstly, skills. In short, my role is about making sure we have the next generation of engineers ready and able to maintain a net zero and very much for gas networks, hydrogen distribution networks. So it's absolutely central to, if you ask Clive what's in my inbox, absolutely building towards net zero and hydrogen network, distributing hydrogen through our network is a core activity of the distribution networks together today, and a real feature, a very practical and real feature. So we don't see this is about the future anymore. In fact, we're losing that language we talked about is today's agenda, and creating those skills, particularly given the natural lead time to that, is key. Our 10-point plan, which by the way, for the audience here, you can find on our website, we've developed a 10-point plan which would support hydrogen transition and very deliberately focuses on skills, which will include in the next 18 months to two years, Cadent launching a hydrogen skills academy, very much preparing the engineers of the future. And we're also committed within the same year, over the next 18 months to 2 years, that is developing a hydrogen education program. So we're very much wanting to reach into future potential, particularly in schools today, and stimulating STEM skills within schools, but very much attracting children's interest into climate change generally, but also the contribution that the gas industry can have positively to do that. We see gas through hydrogen as part of the solution, not part of the problem. It's really important that we get buy-in early on from the future employees of our industry, and for existing employees begin to develop their skills. So we'll be out there getting and creating opportunities for many thousands of young people, I think, which talks to the heart of the agenda today, Clive. Okay. Secondly, we must also be resolute about creating a just transition, a one that does not leave people behind, something we are passionate about in the industry. In our view, the decisions made in the next 10 years, now, Clive, to your point, this is not a 5-year cycle, this is very much a longer term view of around energy transition and our journey to net zero. And we absolutely know that the decisions today will have a profound effect on what our country looks like over the next 100 years, and particularly about home heating. Hydrogen boilers, I mean, it's fantastic to see advertisements today where we're seeing for the first time hydrogen boilers that can accept up to 20% blend of hydrogen being prepared and starting to be sold into the general market. And we believe that alongside heat pumps, is a key feature that will allow us to support the journey to net zero, but very much do that in a way that's affordable and offer a smooth transition for households across the UK, and one that doesn't leave people behind. So one that talks to the ordinary working family and supports them in that. And we believe particularly gas, certainly as the production of hydrogen, as with many new technologies, moves forward, and that price point, gets to probably bottoming out around about 10% of the current price of hydrogen today, as we have found with offshore wind and similar new technologies introduced to the market. In our 10-point plan and our green print, both of which, as I said, you can find online, we outline how the gas distribution network can play a role in supporting the transition net zero, whilst reducing the cost of zero carbon home heating for the poorest in our society, all of which can be achieved through hydrogen as part of the solution, as I said. So, Clive, with that, I'll stop and look forward to the discussion, and I'm happy to pick up some of the detail of the points that I've made as we get into that later. Thank you.
All right, Howard. Well, thanks for kicking us off in that respect. That's great. Keith, before I come across to you, Howard, can I just ask, just unpick a couple of things you said there, but it may be of particular relevance to Streetworks colleagues. We were hearing yesterday from the electric sector about the, and you'll be familiar with this, about the electrification of heat and the equivalency of 300 or 400% of the current electric network would be required. We're never going to go and build that much, ever, clearly. But the inherent use or change of the networks and things will be required at LV level and stuff like that in order to enhance that. But even though those measures may be put in place, Howard, in terms of the hydrification, I don't know, is that a word you use, of the network? What is the uptick in the volume of workers you'll require to deliver hydrogen? I say that because are you in the process of reskilling those workers, or are they people who will be additional as you go through this transition during the next 5 to 15 years?
Yeah, but probably pick at 2 or 3 points there, Clive. Firstly, I think we see gas absolutely, particularly for, and bear in mind we've got 85% of homes today heated through gas boilers. Yeah, we absolutely see it as part of the solution towards domestic heat, and I think we see that alongside the other technologies that support the journey to net zero. So I think what we need to imagine is the ability for the DNOs, the GDNs to support a number of technologies. And certainly if you look at the experience in places like South Australia, you start to really begin to see that as described, whole system thinking. But and also the opportunity to look at currently customers are off grid, potentially on solid fuel, oil today, that gives us opportunity potentially as we reconfigure the network. Second point is in terms of scale of activity, we have the advantage that we are already through our mains replacement program, for Cadent, that's around about 1,600 kilometres per year, and we continue to invest in our current distribution network, and we'll continue to do that till 2032, where that policy ends. And I suspect it won't end. Clive will probably continue to complete that, so that'll get us into the almost 90% of our network is polyethylene distribution network. Most of the discussion relating to the high pressure networks of the steel network largely sits in and around the effect of hydrogen transport at those high pressure tiers, and for certain types of steel that has an effect at certain pressure levels. So we would need to invest in some of that network. fundamental production emerges from. So we've got a project in the Northwest HyNet, and we're also engaged in the project led by Northern Gas in the Northeast, the demand side of which will be in our network in just below the Humber, if you like, Doncaster and Sheffield. So HyNet's very much about the creation, production of hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, and distribution network, a new distribution, then tying into our own network and supporting a hydrogen village in that location. So you start to see, if you like, a new network emerge based on new locations for production. We believe our network is absolutely capable of being repurposed. So to your last question, yes, that would require new skills. So we need our engineers to be able to operate and maintain gas pipelines that transport hydrogen, also enable through the additional investment we need in the things that I've just mentioned to continue to invest in that. So I think certainly through transition, there'll be a combination of continuing to invest in the way we do today. Street works activity significant within that, certainly in mains replacement, but also an additional parallel stream of activity that would occur beyond that point as well as we meet transition. It won't be a uniform transition, so each geography will be different. I think that's a really unique feature, I think, is that's emerging within a network that was configured really to take gas offshore into our pipelines through some main arterial and national transmission pipelines that brought the system to our offtakes and then into our current distribution. That configuration will change, yeah. Some of which will be repurposed, some of which will have to be built new as it is in HyNet.
Okay, Howard, that's very, very clear. Thanks for giving us that explanation. And there's also the sort of the myth-busting issue to do with hydrogen molecules being smaller, and you can't reuse the pipes. But I think what you're saying is the majority of them you can.
Yeah. So when it comes to calorific value, it has a lower calorific value than natural gas. So we need to increase capacity to do that. Yeah. We already have a very clear picture of which parts of our network in which geographies that will be an issue. And yes, we may need in certain geographies.
We're just losing
to reinforce the network, but
we're just
not a significant issue for the vast majority of areas, but something approach the mains replacement impact of hydrogen.
Okay, thank you. I think we got the gist there. Just cut out ever so slightly during the back end of that, but I think we got that. And I think you made the important point that, you know, in the context of this discussion also earlier on, that, you know, leveling up is enduring. Leveling up is a long-term activity. Building back better. Let's move on to Keith, if we may. Keith, and would you like to say a few words just by way of introducing yourself, Keith, in terms of some of the background and some of the things in your inbox, and also give us a perspective on these two items?
Yes, of course. So obviously, good afternoon, everybody. I think, Clive, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. So I guess from a water sector, there's a lot of very similar parallels, clearly, to what Howard has just said. But in terms of my background, I'm Keith Hazlitt. I'm the water director here at Northumbrian Water. And for everybody's benefit, it's a water and wastewater utility, but we actually also own and operate Essex and Suffolk Water as well, which is part of my remit. So in a similar way, I operate a network in the northeast of England as well as in Essex and Suffolk, and that covers the greater sort of northeast London area as well. So there is quite a bit of crossover with I guess the Cadent patch to a certain extent and what we do. So I've been in the industry over 20 years. I've worked in Northern Ireland and endured, I guess, the street works process there as well as in England here now. So I guess got experience from different aspects in that, both in capital delivery and operations. But I guess just to your point, Clive, I mean, I guess from our perspective, We have some slightly different challenges, similar to Howard, obviously, and other utilities. We operate a very much a 5-year business plan where we set that with the regulator based on long-term ambitions as well as that 5-year plan. And for everybody's benefit, you know, whenever we think about building back better, we are actually looking out to 2040 and beyond, particularly for the sort of expected water demand of our customers in those areas, and how we actually provide a water resource and how we actually treat and distribute that water to our customers, both domestic and commercial. So there is a lot of work happens, and it's ongoing at the minute in terms of where we think those challenges will be in terms of growth in the economy, both commercial and housing. And factored into all of that is also about climate change. We have a very important role to play in terms of climate change. Clearly, you see a lot of media news stories around this, whether it be about flooding or whether it be about dry weather or actually whether it's about pollution, which is a big aspect of what you hear about at the minute. So from my perspective, I guess we do also clearly provide a very critical service to customers. We have a number of real pinch points, I would suggest, in terms of building back better, in terms of future business plans around the likes of Sizewell C development at the minute and other aspects like that. And as we do obviously upgrade our infrastructure and add to that asset base, we're clearly also looking at, I guess, how do we do that in a net zero way? So we have a very ambitious plan in terms of being net zero by 2027. You can see that through our emissions possible document, and there's some good stuff in there if it's of interest to everybody on the call. But I think also, Clive, I think what's important is that I guess similar to any network, it is about how do we find the problems before the customer experiences it, but also from a Streetworks perspective, how do we find the problem without having to disrupt the customer or the commuter or the tourist in the least way possible. And that is about how we harness the technology, whether it's sensors or systems or algorithms that actually pinpoint that for us instead of relying on traditionally our staff or our colleagues to do that. And Howard's made a good point around, I guess, how do we ensure that skill base for our people is, I guess, fit for the future in terms of advancement in technology and how we use it. So there's a lot in that space, I think, is going to be really important. But what's really key to us is innovation. So we are always striving to find the next thing really in terms of how we progress the business forwards. What's great is that we do collaborate with the likes of Cadent and others in terms of what's best practice out there. And some of you will see our innovation festival that we run every year. We just finished it actually, and I guess building back better as well, Clive, is also about how do we use all that existing information and digitize that, and how do we share that in an open world where it's available to everybody. And a good example of that's the National Underground Asset Register, where we're looking to digitize all records and actually make it as safe as possible for our staff or other utility staff to be able to understand what's under the ground before they go near it with an excavator or a shovel. So there are a number of things in that space that will support, I guess, the economy and how we grow over the next number of years, but also getting into the bit of reference, I guess, to Streetworks and some of the great things that are happening at the minute in our space. From a leveling up perspective, you know, Howard's covered quite a bit of ground there. I think, you know, we are clearly big employers in our area, and we do invest a huge amount of money for our customers in the asset base, and a lot of that clearly translates into the supply chain and jobs, both direct and indirectly as part of our business plan. And, you know, for us, it's around 3.2 billion over a 5-year period. We're always keen to try and strive to spend as much of that within the local supply chain, which potentially is a lot of people on this call today. So I think all of that's quite important in terms of that leveling up agenda, and I guess really using that supply chain as well to leverage some of that innovation is quite important to us as well. So I've covered a little bit of ground for you there, Clive, in terms of an opening on those 2 points.
No, that's really helpful. And you said a great scene there. Actually, that's super key. Thank you. Let me just pick you up on one thing to do with the leveling up and your and you traced obviously the geography of the water as a group. I mean, do you for example have different applications of investment to meet leveling up between, let's say, your South Suffolk organization and your, I don't know, ANIC organization? Would you, for example, now share as much as you wish to, but would you be predisposed to, for example, to creating training centers where they may not be operationally in the very best place, but for good leveling up reasons? Do you follow me?
Yes, I think so. I mean, look, I think from our perspective, if I've got your question right, is that, I mean, clearly, you know, similar to Cadent, I suppose, is that our staff are very much doing the same service, but are across a number of different areas. We do focus quite a bit on partnership working as well, Clive. So, you know, when we talk about training our staff, we clearly use similar providers to do that, as well as trying to harness as much of our online digital platform for training with our staff. We do have obviously a couple of our own training centers where we train up our own staff, and we actually train some of our third-party contractors in that space. So we really do try and push out that knowledge and skill set. If that's really what the point that you're trying to make there. But also, I think we don't just spend the money directly within Northumbrian Water per se. We do actually harness a lot of different partnership organizations because of the nature of our work, working around rivers and water courses and the environment. We work quite a lot with the wildlife trusts and other entities where we really try and, I guess, pull in as many different people in that space. So that for us is very important, and actually a very critical way as to how we deliver some of the outcomes for customers in terms of that set of solutions.
That's really helpful to understand, and just to extend that and to extend the question a little bit and build on that a little bit more. I think what I was also getting at was this aspect of, if let's say you were going to build a Northumbrian Water Group Academy, for sake of argument, would you take a very conscious decision to put it in an area, let us say, up north, in the same way that the national government might, for example, move government departments up to Leeds and places more north? Is that something that we could actively expect now?
I think from our perspective, clearly, we look at it for a number of different business reasons. You know, clearly, Northumbrian Water is part of the CKI group. You know, Harrods come from obviously Northern Gas Networks, where our shareholder owns that as well. So we do actually partner up in a number of ways in that space in the north, in terms of how we provide some of our fleet and I guess some of our maintenance depots and that type of thing, Clive, where we really do try and bring the same service and try and do it in an efficient way for customer bills. But to be honest, we do split it across both Essex and the north, because of, I guess, the business reasons that we have for the skill sets that we have. We wouldn't be taking a view necessarily on whether it should be north or south, but certainly because we do have a large wastewater business in the north, then clearly we would be looking at centering more of that in the north for those reasons.
I just think it's interesting in this sense of how, you know, government policy, how much that can influence an investment decision. And for people on this call to be aware of whether the future really does look rosy, north of the Wash or wherever however you wish to.
Clive, could I add a point? Well, see, I mean, the first thing to say, Kate, now the way I've been driving the operating model is to really very much decentralize the organisation, really taking our decision making as close as possible to customers. So we've broken the business down into 28 geographical areas, and I think what's really important is the leaders in those geographical areas being very much engaged with the local community and stakeholders within that community, and very much start to develop solutions that really work for that town and city. And I think there are always unique and different characteristics of that. I think very much as Keith's saying, driven by business reasons, but also dominantly by our customer need. We start to build the infrastructure supporting skills development and the like with that. I'd also add, I think training is moving forward enormously. So I'm really excited by things like digital training, using gaming as a method of training, and allowing colleagues not to rely in a traditional sense of attending a school or a physical space to do that. And I think that's a huge enabler to levelling up as well, to allow skills to be almost geographically agnostic in the way in which we might execute those. I think what utilities need to do is modernize their approach to that, and I think collectively we should do that. I think Northumbrian's innovation program is fantastic. I credit Keith as well, and I engaged in it last year, and I think some really exciting stuff across the industry. I think you see it at events like that in terms of particularly digitization of the things we do today, and skills development is no different, and a real leveler, I think, upwards for us if we get that right. So we need to go after that quickly, I think, is key.
I think I absolutely agree with you. It's been quite a big theme during this conference, actually, the whole issue to do with training and skills, the recognition that, to be honest with you, probably some of the technical skills and training aspects don't take a little bit longer to bubble down to the street works area, just by the nature of how street works tends to evolve. It probably potentially can arrive there a little bit later than some of the other areas. But I'm especially glad, Keith, that you majored on that point, and picking up on your innovation points. One of the key pillars of the Streetworks UK and Hawk UK vision is one of the 5 pillars is expressly around digitization. And that's as it applies, not just in the context of our communication, which we'll come to in a second with Peter, not just in the context of communication, but also in the context, as you touched on there, Howard, of training. And I should just mention, Keith, we actually had NUAR on to give a 10-minute piece this morning, just to really get folks really focused on what was coming down the pike there from that Cabinet Office work, which is key and important work, impacting safety and all other aspects of what we do.
And Clive, if I could just make one last quick point, because I think it is important for everyone on the call. So I think what it's been quite traditional potentially about the utility sector in the past is that when you go and try and source a repair maintenance operative, for example, we've always tended to go with the same approach. We always tend to look for somebody with Chapter 8 training or street works or whatever that may be as a skill set, and we always end up recruiting the same person. And actually what we have tried to do over the last 6 months is actually break that mold and actually gone out to people with really virtually no qualifications in the north in particular, and tried to bring in a more junior operative that actually can then gain that skill set, but more importantly be wedded to our culture and values within the business, and how they then provide that service for customers. Because I would say that we have maybe fallen into a trap in the past where we just keep recruiting the same person and you end up with the same outcome and the same thinking. And that's something that's quite exciting for us at the minute in terms of how that's going to develop, because that for me is, across the utility sector, how do we bring more people in that just need that opportunity in life to do something different?
Howard did touch on going out to schools. I was very conscious how much your innovation festival had caught the imagination of young people in particular. Do you do a schools programs as well? Is that something you're hooked into, Keith? Not you personally, but the teams.
Yeah, we would visit over 200 schools a year, generally speaking. Obviously, it's been difficult over the last sort of 12, 18 months. We put a huge amount of effort into our water efficiency program in terms of that next generation. Clearly, there's a lot of very tough targets going forwards around how much we consume every day in terms of water and obviously leakage and things. So yes, we do, but also what's really critical we find is the universities and the colleges. You know, it's an opportunity for potential I guess people to come into our business that are used to a university environment, you know, from an academia environment, if you like, and actually start to help us shape solutions as well. And I've no doubt that Howard and the team at Caden do something extremely similar. So it is about those different steps through the education system and how we can leverage that as well for the customers.
Well, that's absolutely first class, and I should just mention, you know, one of the topics we really have got into in terms of discussing education and progression is with part of the vision on the training and skills side of things is what does it mean for what we're loosely calling an operative's career pathway. And probably in street works, you won't be surprised to hear this, that, you know, in the street works area, it can be quite a short channel of opportunity for people, and we're looking for ways that people can build, enhance their skills, and move up in a way that we and possibly pop some structure around that, and work more closely with that. Okay, let me give Keith and Howard a bit of a pause for breath there now. And Peter, turning to you, obviously, you know, very much with your finger on the pulse in terms of in terms of the, you know, the government's aims, ambitions, and progress and rate. You've heard the colleagues talk about, you know, actually the importance of levelling up is not a one shot inside this Parliament session. Build Back Better is actually investing for the future. How strongly do you think the central government agenda, as you read things, is going to endure and not volte-face in their face shortly, and leave them again in no man's land? What's your thinking on that, Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Clive. Well, I think to sort of preface my comments, it's worth, you know, just stating that one of the big areas of focus for me and the team I work with here is thinking about how we kind of position the importance of the streetworks sector with policymakers, the media, both, you know, government, not just in Westminster, but as you've mentioned it, kind of political and policymakers kind of throughout the different tiers, you know, directly elected mayors, combined authorities, local authorities, things like that. Clearly, Building Back Better and levelling up have been big kind of watchwords under the Boris Johnson government, and I think we would very much expect that to continue throughout his time as Prime Minister. I don't think they, as phrases, are going anywhere, but obviously what they mean in, you know, practical terms can change depending on which bit of government you're talking to on which day of the week and what press releases they've got to put out that month. Is a slight risk. There's I think it's very important to understand that there's a big role for interpretation, both within government, but actually across all different industry sectors as well. And so the way that we, I think we would describe the relevance of Build Back Better and levelling up within the streetworks sector is about quite simply providing the infrastructure for a digital zero carbon future for the UK. And ensuring that that infrastructure is provided on an equal basis or platform for all parts of the country, both geographically and from a socio-economic perspective. So I think that, you know, if you're looking at what does this mean for us, that would be, I think, a decent shot at your elevator pitch. And I think that immediately starts to tie you into government priorities that are 100% going to endure, whether or not the specific tagline of levelling up or Build Back Better survives a change of government or a change of political fortunes at any particular point. I think within that, how do we position the importance of street works? Well, one is pretty simply that street work matters because it is a key part of the process of building and, either installing or upgrading the majority of that infrastructure. We obviously look across all the various different utility sectors, from broadband through to water, gas, electric, etc. And we, that in itself is both a kind of opportunity and a challenge, I think, for us as an organisation and for us as a sector. I think it's worth noting that although we require an awful lot of street works and probably more works than we've had historically to happen in the coming years to facilitate the digital and the net zero transitions, the way in which those works are carried out is also going to come under more scrutiny. We will be, as all of, every sector is going to be expected, we are going to be expected to operate in a greener manner as we go about doing our day-to-day. There are probably an awful, quite a lot of different ways that will come out in the wash in the coming months. So that would be my kind of elevator pitch of things. In terms of some of the specific challenges I would expect us to sort of see coming down the line that we will deal with as an organisation as Streetworks, but that I think the industry will face as well. The top two I think have been covered quite extensively, both on this discussion and I think in some of the previous discussions already, is around skills and workforce, recruitment, retraining, upskilling, and doing that across a number of different sectors and across a pretty wide variety of different types of roles. One is, as I mentioned, decarbonisation, the way in which some of these works are carried out. But I think there's a couple of other challenges that I would expect us to perhaps start seeing come to the fore a little more in the next 12 to 18 months. One is around the change to the road environment in which works are taking place. One of the other consequences of the transition to net zero is changes to the emphasis of transport solutions, and I think you will see a continued rise of cycling, micromobility, and things like that, which in turn is going to lead to, whether it's specific changes to infrastructure within the road network, dedicated cycling lanes or things like that, but also the types of vehicles or things that are occupying the roads in which the majority of these works have to take place. I don't think it's a case of ripping up the rule book, but I think a lot of the regulations and practices in the sector have been developed in an era in which car has been king, and that's going to have to be tweaked and changed as we move forwards. And of course, you have a kind of changing macroeconomic climate where inflation, rising material costs are going to put extra pressures, I think, across the range of sectors that constitute the Streetworks community. And that, I suspect may be particularly tricky for sectors like gas, electric and water, where you have, very long-term and very regulated environments for how you plan and carry out your investments. And so that will add a bit of extra pressure that I'm sure will need to be taken into account. And I think the final thing I'd like to reflect on before I pass it back is, Streetworks UK, I think we sit at a key juncture here. Streetworks will play a key element in delivering a lot of these themes, delivering a lot of these works, but the Streetworks community can't achieve all of this on its own. There's a huge amount of collaboration needed across the different sectors. We look at things with a Streetworks perspective, obviously at Streetworks UK, but what that means in reality is several different industries, gas, electric, water, broadband, who all do things in it, although they all require Streetworks, they all do things in a slightly different way for a slightly different reason to achieve a slightly different outcome. All need to kind of, all of that needs to kind of come together, and government at all different levels needs, is a critical partner that we need to engage with, and there is greater decentralisation than ever in terms of decision makers and influencers who sit across the public sector that we need to be able to engage with. So those that's I guess my opening gambit. So I'll hand it back and happily go through any questions.
Thanks, Peter. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I absolutely get your bit about the, we clearly identified the skills of workforce and the upskilling required in this next period to meet that. And you've quite rightly highlighted those themes that some of which have come out earlier in terms of the very significant change to the road environment that will affect us in terms of the both the climate change things that sit beside, very closely beside, Build Back Better and Levelling Up. Just while if we could just stick with Build Back Better and Levelling Up, and just to tweak you on this one, Peter. Do you think Build Back Better and Levelling Up here to stay, even with a change of government, if we were to see a significant change of government? What's your reading of the runes on that one?
I mean, it partly depends on the timing of the change of government. I think the things that are politically driving those two things, particularly in the Conservative Party, means that the sentiment behind it is not likely to change for the Conservative Party. The way they won the last election and the way they have kind of recast their electoral coalition to target voters that in the North and the Midlands that traditionally didn't vote Conservative means that they have to be seen to be delivering concrete quality of living changes for people in those communities in order to maintain that electoral coalition. So I think levelling up is absolutely here to stay for the duration of this government, and I think Labour likewise is going to be fighting for a lot of those same seats. And I don't think you're likely to see a Labour Party come in who are going to advocate a move away from the fundamental principle at stake there, although the tagline is likely to change or be different. And Building Back Better, I think, is really kind of levelling up interpreted as what we need to do coming out of the pandemic in terms of rebounding the economy. That one, I think, that's the one where you may see some shift as those kind of macroeconomic challenges start to pose slightly different questions to the government. We have seen quite a sharp rebound in economic activity and growth as the economy has been allowed to open up, which is not surprising, but the way that has happened on a global level as well as in the UK, combined with some of the challenges perhaps that you've seen around Brexit, which was a pretty fundamental change to us, I think we'll see cost of living become a significantly higher priority for the government, and I think that's where this sort of Build Back Better may well evolve into something that is a little bit more focused around addressing cost of living issues in the kind of short to medium term.
Got it. Okay. Howard and Keith, do challenge any of that if you wish, but bring the focus back to Howard and Keith. And now, by the way, if anyone wants to post any comments or any questions in the chat to it, then please do so. Howard and Keith, my next area really was, we've obviously got a lot of sort of medium and smaller sized, companies represented, and some very modest contractors represented by Streetworks UK. In this sort of key area we've talked about levelling up, how do you think, in terms of getting ahead of the curve, that many of these smaller contractors can seek out and exploit the opportunities of levelling up as much as they exist? How would they exploit it in any of your grand regional areas? How could they best get on the front foot in that situation? Is that possible, or is it or really is it just a grand political design, but it doesn't really translate to much for them at their level?
It's a really good question, Clive. I think from our perspective, clearly we have a procurement strategy in place that really tries to I guess, harness as many of the local supply chain and suppliers as we can, whether that be the category management side of it in terms of your sort of smaller asset provision and the refurbishment of that. So we do use a wide range of large, medium and small contractors, because quite a number of them, Clive, in our part of the industry are quite specialist in terms of what they do, particularly when you talk more about water and wastewater treatment inside the fence. If we talk more about, I guess, from a Streetworks perspective and that sort of below ground infrastructure, again, clearly we have within Northumbrian, we have very much a blend of internal repair maintenance crews, both north and south, but we also have a blend of local contractors north and south that are quite small entities, you know. So at the minute we would have you know, companies like Fast Flow in the north, or in the south we would have much smaller entities than that. And actually we've got 3 or 4 entities that provide a similar service to the north. So we do have a very flexible procurement strategy. We obviously have some large partners, but we also try and engage through different frameworks for different sizes of contracts and value with that smaller supply chain. And then we do get into more discrete aspects in our part of the world of leak detection and meter provision and that type of thing, Clive, that's actually quite small entities local to where we are that provide that service. So I hope that, you know, we do provide a very diverse strategy in terms of how we actually try and engage with both small, medium and large contractors.
Okay. Howard, I presume you probably voice similar, would you?
Yeah, similar. I mean, the biggest program we operate is the renewal of the gas mains, the old metallic gas mains. As mentioned earlier, 1,600 kilometres a year. So we engage around about 1,300. So that's across today around about 80 individual suppliers. I think similar to Keith, what we've actively pursued moving from the last regulatory period to this is to delayer the supply chain. So I now directly engage with those 80 suppliers. Myself and Steve Fraser, we have sessions with that community of owners. So we are very much sharing with them as small to medium-sized enterprises a 10-year investment program, which allows them to invest in and build their businesses. I think that's really powerful. So it's very different from where we came from, where we had 2 large international providers, if you like, providing the same activities as we now have 80 today. So very much our philosophy aligned to the broader model that I described earlier, where we're moving it into those 28 geographies to have local suppliers and really begin to build vibrant enterprises, take our apprenticeship schemes into those organizations, into that supply chain, enable them to really engage. Very much looking to reach into hard to reach employment groups within that as well. So very deliberate plans working with those organizations to begin to recruit into those communities as well. So we start to really get that trickle down effect. So we spend about £500 million a year, I think, without trying probably a 2 times multiplier on that in terms of trickle down effect. I think with real focus in the way that Keith's described, if you engage with a local supply chain, I think you're multiplying that by another 2-fold, I would suggest, in terms of the impact and the communities we operate in. And part of the benefit, I think, of certainly our operations is there is a significant forward investment over that 10 years. So it allows that longer term discussion and that longer term investment to move through into those communities through those small businesses. So really crucial part of what we do.
And just help us understand this, if you could. So at your level in the company and the geographies that you're operating at, is it transparently clear to you? Does the government give you, or do the departments of BEIS or wherever, do they give you areas that they wish you to focus in? Is it as hard-edged as that? Do they give you geographic locations to predominantly, if there's a choice between 2 geographies, go for that geography? Would they give you any direction, scope, or guidance or help in that sense? No.
Mains replacement is dominantly driven by a safety consideration. Right. So we are replacing metallic pipes at a consistent level over the remaining periods of 2032. It's an agreement with the Health and Safety Executive as part of that policy. So, right. So it's firstly directed by those asset management considerations, separately by local stakeholders, and certainly highways organisations and working. What we don't want to do is saturate a particular part of a particular geography, so because it would be impossible to manage street works. We wouldn't be given road access in any event, but
No.
I think the benefit of having that long-term view allows us to plan out over that longer term with those other stakeholders, alongside having the certainty of who the supplier will be through that period. And that's one of the benefits of building. So you begin to build those relationships with the highways officers and the department that allows us to do that. But very much driven by asset management considerations, Clive, dominantly, but at a local level, very much which pipes over which week or which month or which year is very much we do in consideration with local highways authorities and more broadly local stakeholders. So if we're moving into a programme where we're working in front of a lot of schools, that's something we'll see well in advance, and we'll be having discussions around how we approach that part of the programme at that stage.
And Keith, sort of same question for you, really. I mean, if there's a choice between putting a reservoir here, a reservoir there are more overweening operational issues than purely the levelling up agenda. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a few aspects to this probably. So, our 5-year business plan is driven by a very extensive consultation process with customers and stakeholders, similar to other utilities, I've no doubt. And then we take that feedback in terms of what's important to them. But because we obviously operate a water and wastewater business, flooding in somebody's home is clearly a very, very important thing in terms of resolving that problem, as well as what's important for leakage or interruption to supply in terms of that. So we actually have quite a diverse range of measures that customers feel are important to them, and that could be different in the Northeast compared to Suffolk, for example. So there's that part of it. I think certainly our water resource management plan very much looks at where we are going to have long-term issues and how we plan for that from an asset management perspective. So we do think about, I guess, how we put forward our business plan with the economic regulator, and I guess through that lens, as well as the Environment Agency or the Drinking Water Inspectorate, we agree that common plan that's important to customers, but it's also important to service levels and what they would expect to see from us. But I think what's really important there is that actually we're being expected to do more for less. And similar to Howard, I've no doubt that we are having to drive a lot of efficiencies through the business now to make sure that we are delivering that infrastructure both above ground and below ground, and delivering on the customer promise. So it is really important, as we've talked about today, about how we harness that innovation and technology, but also how we invest in our people, as Howard has touched on as well. So I think from our perspective, it's the customer bit, it's overlaying the asset management risks, but it's also overlaying what's the long-term risks as well, in terms of, believe it or not, having enough water for customers, particularly in the south of England, where it is going to become really apparent over the next 20 years as we see climate change really hit, that we are going to have to think about producing water in different ways, particularly on the south coast. Right,
got that. Okay. We got a couple of questions coming. Actually, one came into me via email because someone's dialed in and said I posted that one bit below that. But Alison at 1532 has picked up on a theme again that we were talking about this morning. And this is to do with the centrality of program planning. And she asks, I'll just read it out just so we can all get our thoughts around that. Does the panel believe that the UK would benefit from a more coordinated and centrally directed program of infrastructure upgrades, which will require street works? And what challenges would this prevent to industry? Would it solve some of our problems deciding where and when to invest in infrastructure? Do we actually just have too many competing priorities? So what about this subject about a more coordinated and centrally directed program of infrastructure? I mean, at your level, gentlemen, I'm sure you're both almost on telephone terms with Keith Arnott at the National Infrastructure Commission. But what's your perspective on the centrally directed program of infrastructure?
But personally, Clive, I think the opposite is important. I think we need to be much more local and regional in our emphasis and our ability to work, particularly multi-utility but multi-infrastructure investment, and actually look much more broadly. And things like conflict management, I think is better done locally. I think that better aligns to naturally the asset management decision making that utilities need to balance. And I think to Keith's point, I think it allows us to really engage in a meaningful way with the people we are affecting on our day-to-day work activities and the service that our end consumer is expecting as well. So I see the opposite. I think what we've got to become really skilled at and better at is the ability to engage locally and make really smart, agile choices within the context of those local communities. So I think there are always considerations when you're looking at national infrastructure, and perhaps broader considerations. Certainly across GDNs, we're very conscious we need to work together to consider the broader policy agenda associated with hydrogen. I think that goes without saying. We do that with government departments, BEIS, certainly our own department, but also we would do that with organisations like Health and Safety Executive, importantly. So yes, in that sense, I think there are very much central considerations that we need to think about collectively. But I think when it comes to planning and programming our works, I think that's got to be we just got to be a damn sight better at working locally together.
Okay.
And Keith and I could do a lot better at that, I'm sure, within the south of our patches. Yeah.
So Keith, less centrality, not more. Is it true?
Yeah, I would completely agree with Howard. I think there's definitely a need for the local areas to engage better collectively. I've seen good examples in the past, particularly from Northern Ireland, where working with Phoenix Gas and Northern Ireland Water, we were going into the same streets when the opportunity came up to actually put the same in, that infrastructure in once, and that was it. And I've seen great examples of that, even in, believe it or not, in Estonia, in Tallinn, where when they go in to do a street, they do the whole lot there and then, and that's a rolling program. So I think there's a lot more we could definitely do locally in that space to I guess, be less disruptive for customers, and at the end of the day, hopefully be a lot more efficient in terms of how we spend our money. So I think, yes, I think from a Streetworks perspective and that platform and how you could evolve that into something bigger, at that as we go through our investment plans, whether it be gas, electricity or water, I think there's a lot more we could actually do there, definitely.
I mean, let's approach this from a slightly different direction, because this is another conversation that we had in one of the breakout sessions, was to do with we don't seem to be very good at the moment of different utilities coming together and managing to collaborate sufficiently to renew at the same time. And there was one, and you may throw your hands up in horror at this, Howard and Keith, but there was a very strong proposal, perhaps naively put on the table, that why don't these massive utilities just get together and use the same contractor at the same time to deliver the same stuff into the ground, into the street? Wouldn't that be more efficient for you, more efficient for the contractor, and more efficient for the traveling public? Is that nirvana? Is that something we should strive for, think about, or will you just, frankly, your general counsels are just going to throw that right out the door?
So Clive, I automatically could tell you a whole bunch of reasons why not, but I think to your question, I think we have to. And I think we have a duty and responsibility to find routes through that. I think I can see a lot of practical considerations that need to be worked through in our ability to do that. Whether that requires the same supply chain, I think it's, as Keith's already referenced, when we're working outside of Cannon Street tube station in the centre of London, as we were last year, replacing gas mains, and we're using open cut methods to do that, very large. You're surrounded by power, water, data cables. We absolutely collaborate in that, and we rely a little bit too much, I think, for that conflict management, that bringing together through perhaps the Highways Authority, TfL, to a point. Yeah, and I think we could be much more active in that space, and I do think TfL as an organisation has really very much encouraged that the utilities and some of their collaboration forums. So we're very active with them, particularly in London. I think that there's some sort of ways of working there, I think, that are emerging that are perhaps a route to that, Clive. And I just think we need to continue to strive to do more of that and achieve it across the UK, not just in the centre of London.
What does it need, Keith? Does it need a bit more incentivization to make it happen, do you think? I mean, there is incentivization technically within Street Manager system to encourage that. The actual exploitation and use of that, I think we have to acknowledge, is actually fairly limited.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think, yes, you do have the platforms there that give us the ability to see what is happening, but I guess it's how do we convert that into a longer term plan that lets us see actually what we intend to do for the next 2, 3, 4 years as opposed to the next 3 months. So, you know, I think there's something in that in terms of how we could get the right people in a room to really talk about the structure of how that could work at whether it's a local level or a national level. I think there's great merit in starting to have that type of discussion, because I don't think, or I don't see where that's really happening at the minute. And maybe it's, you know, maybe through the regulatory regime, maybe that's something that could be encouraged in that space as well.
I have to say, in Streetworks, anytime we start talking about regulatory frameworks, where people start jumping from side to side very slightly on their chairs. But I think it's something that's interesting to hear. I very much welcome your perspective on this. And I know, Keith, you've only got a few more moments with us, but Peter touched on this a little bit earlier on, which was the metro mayoral topic, i.e. the evolution of the metro mayors. And I think it's fair to say, you can give us a quick perspective on this, but they haven't really cut their teeth with any power in terms of the delegated activity and significantly made a difference, certainly not in our area yet. But do you think that the metro mayor system potentially has the ability to grasp and do this? And is that going to be an effective overlay to make this happen? Or frankly, is this just from your perspective as titans of the industry, is this just another layer of bureaucracy that, quite frankly, you could do without, Keith? You're on mute.
It had to happen at least once, Clive, didn't it? So, yeah, look, I think from my perspective, there's a lot of challenges, isn't there? And I mean, your metro mayor, I'm not overly familiar with that, I have to admit, being in the north or in Essex, but certainly from my perspective, I think there's lots that can be done in this space, particularly with the overlays that I would have with the likes of Cadent or other companies.
Well, Howard, I know you're all over your metro mayor. Certainly your local one near Coventry. I know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's highly relevant to us, Clive. I think Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, London. For us, it's a really important feature of probably something I touched on in my opening piece, which is the energy policy as it emerges, particularly in the direction towards energy transition to net zero. And the mayors have been really important part of our success in things like HyNet and progressing that, and the Eastern Hydrogen project, and the collaboration with local government for that, and is absolutely critical. And I referred to it in my opening piece that if you look at places like South Australia, I think that's where you begin to get very much more decentralized, geographically unique configuration of the energy system that supports a whole system. Lots of jargon in that, Clive, but we need to come together to find a blend of solutions to be able to, particularly for heat, to be able to support a local area to become net zero in terms of their energy use. Fundamentally, we do, and that's will only be facilitated, I think, with regional engagement in a really detailed and specific manner. And I think that's what we have seen. So it's more than just political. It's actually about really bringing together decision makers locally to allow private and public sector to allow combined thought process into how we stitch together an energy system in the future to meet that demand.
Okay.
So I see it in a very practical way and a really important part of that journey.
Howard, thank you. Keith, I know you've only got 15 seconds left. I know you've got to go, you've got a key phone call to make. So Keith, thank you very much indeed. Howard, I'd like you to stay on and address the next question down that we have yet to answer. But Keith, from us all, thank you very much indeed for providing the water perspective. I can only imagine what it must be like going from somewhere where you own everything in Northern Ireland to going to somewhere where it's such a disparate thing to try and grab together. And particularly interested in some of your thinking there, particularly on the skills and workforce and how we can move forward in that area and elsewhere. But Keith, thank you ever so much indeed. Appreciate your time.
That's great.
Can't hear you for some reason, Keith. You suddenly stopped, gone out, even though you're not on mute. It's not coming through for some reason. There we go.
All the best. Okay, so thank you very much, and good luck with your awards, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Brilliant, Keith. Thanks very much. So, Howard, let's just come back to that secondary question there. What fundamental changes will the industry likely face to ensure that we support the government's agenda on building back better and levelling up? Is there anything that's particularly fundamental in terms of a change, or do you think that we're in a sense all the time moving in that direction?
I mean, I hope you got a sense of it anyway, Clive. I don't think at all that the future energy system is a continuation of the current system. I think it has to be brought together in a very different way. So I think we are talking about fundamental change. I don't at all believe in meeting net zero. That's incremental or at the margins of what we do. I think it's really cuts to the heart of the way certainly we work in our industry. So I think that probably directly in terms of features of that. I do think immediately if you take where we are today, I think the consumer voice is going to be absolutely pivotal, central to the choices that we make in terms of, particularly for home heating, to find a route forward that doesn't leave people behind, that supports some of the most vulnerable in our society to be part of a net zero energy system, supporting particularly heating their homes, but in a way that doesn't create affordability barrier either to the transition to it or in the longer term. I think today, and I think Peter touched on it, we need to earn legitimacy through absolutely stellar customer performance. We need when we need to interrupt a supply, we do that absolute minimum amount of time and make our asset resilient. We adapt to the known change in the environment, so flood risk and the sort of things that we need to adapt to and make sure that resilient to that change over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, but as we move through the energy transition. So I think today is absolutely about continuing to focus on the customer experience, continuing to think around how we maintain a really resilient energy system, both across DNOs and GDNs, to support our consumer today, but very much build that legitimacy within their minds for our future role within the industry as we move forward. But yeah, I think it's fundamental change, Clive. It's probably another conference beyond the one today to get into the nuts and bolts of that. But
sure,
it's not simply a continuation.
Someone's asked a question there behind that question that was put forward, asking what does the panel see to be the biggest blockers to building back better, and how can they be overcome? I mean, are there some things that you're wrestling with, Howard, that just don't that really seem intractable problems on that?
I think skills. I talked about it in my opening. The skills, and I mentioned that sort of parallel running. We build the skills of tomorrow through and with the existing workforce and grow into some capabilities that don't exist today, managing that energy system that I've described. So that's not an overnight fix, and equally not entirely clear and certain about some aspects of that as well. So that some of that's emerging, if you like, in terms of our understanding of what that will look like. There clearly are things that this is so without going too far into the detail of this, but there are things clearly within the regulatory framework that would need to change in its broader sense to support that journey. That's not news to regulators in the industry at all, or government departments equally. Clearly, we need to find a way that we continue to attract investment in the sector as well. So we need to have a proposition that works for private sector investors and the market in terms of ongoing investment into the system. And yeah, there is a degree of uncertainty in that journey to net zero, certainly for investors and businesses like ours. I think it's really important we maintain their interest and investment in the sector through that journey. And I mentioned previously the consumer, the exclamation markets. It's absolutely key that there is real buy-in from our end customers. So for those 11 million homes and businesses we serve, I think we absolutely have a duty to engage them and help them understand, and because there will have to be some change that affect them within their homes in the way in which they work. We believe hydrogen is the smoothest and lowest cost route to net zero, and we do that very much with as I said all along, really the consumer in mind, and particularly the consumer that's most vulnerable in society, which we won't leave behind. So I think those three things, right? Regulators, investors, the consumer, critically, I think were the three big. If I was going to offer you some three big headers,
got it. Peter, obviously Howard's touched a lot there on the word listening, and he's used the expression, I think, listening to the consumer. From a government perspective, the government listens to, if you like, the electorate, and then the other ear, the government is listening to the utility, who's informed by the consumer. What's your observation of that? Is that do different channels emerge because of that, or is it one voice? Do you sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. To that end, I think one of our challenges when we talk to the government about street works is kind of making that a linkage back to the consumer ultimately, because it often gets lost, when, I think it's improving now, but, a lot of the time different bits of government will look at it with a different lens. The Department for Transport will often still look at it as this is just an inconvenience to road users, rather than this is a necessary process that is upgrading and delivering better, more relevant infrastructure for the entire country and for all of the customers of the, for utilities customers. And often utilities customers won't necessarily make the connection themselves. But obviously the government also, different bits of the government, understand that investment in infrastructure is a good, effective way of kind of, of providing economic stimulus. I think going back to a couple of your questions earlier on, I think it was interesting. You were sort of posing the question of, would you plan a reservoir or training centre in a slightly different part of the country because of levelling up? But I think perhaps more on a more basic basis than that, anything the government does to facilitate or incentivise investment in this kind of national infrastructure automatically has economic impact, distributed across the nation, because you need to do this stuff everywhere. And I think that, for me, there's a link back to the question, I think it's from Tom, around blockages. One of the reasons why streetworks is really important is it is a necessary process to do much of that upgrade or installation. But if we get it wrong, or if there are elements of the streetworks process that are because of, whether it's because of regulation or kind of slightly outdated practices, or the kind of complexity or messiness of the kind of landscape that needs to be navigated by utilities, what it really does is it's kind of taking it's taking away from the impact of that economic stimulus, and it is just, you know, it has the potential to just act as something that delays the delivery of stuff that is absolutely critical, and means that we're not doing it in a way that could have it as broad a set of benefits as it possibly could do. And I think it's trying to bring it all back to that is why streetworks as an issue matters, is because it is a necessary process that has to happen. And we can either make it happen better and in a way that contributes more towards all of the goals that we want to get out of it, or it can be something that, if we get it wrong, can detract from all of the things that are the reasons we are having to do this.
Got it. Okay, you touch on that means of doing things better. If I just point you, Howard, to Tom's 1552 question in the tote, and it may be a bit of a low-level question. You may not see this activity at your level every day, but you may have a perception about it. So how do you see the role of the highways authorities in facilitating these programs of works we are now seeing? I mean, do you perceive them and the current broad rule book that we work in to be a blocker to overcome? And do you think there is scope for from what your people tell you, for the highways folk and indeed us as utilities to work even closer to better for the greater good? Do you have a sense of that at all?
I'll firstly say highways authorities play a critical role in safety, the congestion within our cities, and, you know, long-term effects of streetworks, particularly in terms of defects and potholes and other things that are, you know, are clearly significantly important to towns and cities across the UK. So I mean, the first thing to say is that the function is absolutely essential. In my mind's eye, and certainly the belief system I wish to instill certainly within our organisations, to get things right first time, be predictable, you know, spend less time in the street than we might have done historically, control our works in all aspects, and actually that relationship will be a very positive relationship, and you know, the costs of road access will be less to our organisation. So it's difficult, Clive, when I'm very aware that we don't get those things right consistently across our business. And I see the data, I see some of the penalties, yeah, certainly, but I also, generally speaking, 99% of occasions would agree with the highways officer that's imposing that sanction on us. Yeah, so I think it's very much about utilities addressing some of the things that are getting away in high performance in that place, and really managing that on a day-to-day basis. That's a first point. So I think a fundamentally important point. And the second point is the one perhaps we referred to earlier, and I do see that a little bit within London, where I think that broader, longer-term view about road access and how we work together across utilities and other infrastructure demands that occur. I think bringing that together and facilitating that, encouraging innovation in that space, I think TfL's doing a really positive role with utilities, and encouraging that collaboration, creating the time and space for that across our programs is really a role. It'd be good to see it more proactive than a reactive model, I think, within the authorities as well. Yeah, and I said that needs to be beyond London in terms of the ability to do that. In my view, that's probably the sweet spot. But let's get the basics right as well, Clive, would be, and that's a utility issue largely, I would say.
Yeah. Good. All right. Well, look, I think, Howard, you've given us an enormous amount of your time on this fine Wednesday afternoon, and hugely grateful for the areas you cantered over. You've given us a really clear understanding of, you know, hydrogen and the hydrification of the networks, the context of electrification against that, and then down into the detail of skills, your perspectives on that, training and you've teased me in terms of how we might perhaps more broadly collaborate across our different utilities in the future. We touched on the regulatory, and you finished on some points on the authorities, and in between time we've delved into the mayoral aspects and indeed the government agenda overall. So Howard, thank you. You've given us a really rich seam of stuff to reflect upon, and in the whole, and interestingly for me, you painted a real picture of should we say affirmity and an enduring nature of Build Back Better and leveling up, which is here to stay, and for us to think clearly about as we take forward within our individual companies and utilities, and indeed support organizations to support those in terms of what we do. So many thanks from us, Howard. And as we reach the witching hour of 4 o'clock, I'm bound to let you off the hook at this stage, and to say thank you very much indeed for your support. And I know how much Caden has played such a significant role in Streetworks, and your testament, your engagement is testament to that today. So thank you very much indeed.
I'm grateful, Clive. Thank you, and I've enjoyed the session. So have a good rest of the day.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, Howard.
Bye.
Cheerio for now.
Bye.
So, well, look, everybody, that brings us blisteringly close to the back of the conference now. After 2 days, you've been very patient and have sat through and engaged extremely well in a range of what has been a pretty varied and different sessions this last 2 days. If I cast back to Graham Day's situating the context immediately in the rush of post COP26, and therefore feeding really right into everything that we've had to get our heads around in terms of decarbonised electrification and that side of environmental aspects of the considerations of the Hawke vision. Feeding right into the I thought a very rich conversation about decarbonisation, what it really means on the ground. If you remember Sam Larson and David Spillett, tracing out the political aspects of that at that level, and then Paul and Fiona from WPD and Scottish Water giving us a really good sound sense of what that means on the ground for them, and some great examples of best practice there. I hope you've enjoyed the breakout session. I know we had some comms issues on the first day, but I think those were mostly resolved, and saw some really good commentary coming in on the second day to those. Safe people, safe planet. We probably didn't get quite so much into the into the intersection between safe people and safe planet. What really were what really were the impacts of us moving into this decarbonised world? But that's certainly something for us to raise our noddles up to and think about as we go forward. But there were some other extremely important safety points made during that I know Tom's taken away from. And Alison, mostly a give back, I think, on, but some great conversations that I heard on that in terms of the programs going forward. And then yesterday afternoon, the workforce and training and skills bit, it seems to be an enduring thing that's gone through virtually all of our conversations at virtually every level, and so it should do, because of course that is key to what's important to developing our people. And in the particularly joint sessions, you recall yesterday afternoon, interesting to hear how relatively extremely closely aligned we are with the authorities in that particular area, which is good, and as it should be. This morning's session on the future of the road networks and how we work in it, very capably chaired by Elizabeth. I think we all took something away from that, if not just a brief update on NUAR, but also the capacities of one network at the end of the afternoon, at the end of the morning, as it were, to really capture that. And then this afternoon's session. Well, look, I hope that's been hugely helpful. As is the tradition on these situations, it falls to me now to just point you to all the social media feeds that will be announcing the awards, the Streetworks Awards for this year, virtually and online. I have to say the actual mementos of that awards are not virtual. They're very much hard-edged pieces of glass, properly and amply engraved for the winners of all the various categories. This year, the actual awarding chairman was of the panel overall was very happy to confirm to me that there were no last-minute fine distinctions between needing me to make any further decision, but there was some close run, some very close run first and second places there for the awards, and we will talk a little bit more about that in the next couple of days after the prime announcements have been made at 5 o'clock this afternoon. So the closing part of business this afternoon, really for me, is really just to make the chairman's awards announcement, really, and it gives me great pleasure really to say that, you know, if I look back over the course of this last year, there's been a huge amount of work done, largely gone on, not least because of COVID, not least because of the various reviews and code reviews and the consultations and the setting up and revising of streetwork structures more generally, and the list goes on and on in terms of the pace of work. Not least it's been enabled, I suppose, by, you know, the fashion of Zoom and Teams, but also just people grinding out and getting that work done. And for that, I'm enormously grateful for the support that Streetworks UK as an organisation has received from its membership, and by what you are now on the call, an extremely well engaged membership. I think where I come down to was there was actually a range of very strong candidates for the Chairman's Award this year, and in my mind, it's very clear that it goes to somebody who has really picked up the baton and run with it. In a sense, they are selfless. In a sense, the person I will refer to in a second does not seek the limelight per se, but also that person is not afraid to step forward and offer a strong and well-informed view, a very well-informed view when asked for it. I also think this person is a popular choice. I think will be a popular choice. Not that popularity is a qualification. Let me be absolutely quite clear about that. But they represent their company well, in my observation. But they also strongly have shouldered a range of activities at and across the bailiwick that represents what Streetworks UK. So I'm happy to confirm that the Chairman's Award for 2021 is awarded with my very strongest recommendation and my great thanks to Alison Williams. So Alison, I know that you're on the call this afternoon. I can actually see your line manager. I think Elizabeth Draper is signed in as a panelist. Just by the way, the comms has fallen on this one. But Alison, I know that you can't speak forth and that, but I'd be happy for everyone just to put a little tick in the chat box, just to represent a small appreciation for all of us at Streetworks for what you've done, and congratulations on the award of the Chairmanship's Award. Excellent. Well, that concludes matters for everything this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed, and we'll look forward to getting a conference brochure out this year. It will be a digital brochure in as much as it is a two-page which effectively describes what happens in very pithy terms in terms of each event, and then people can download and read a quick summary of that. I think you'll love the design and the simplicity of that when it gets through. It's very distributable around your organizations, and I think will be very, very helpful for communicating digitally around the communities. And for those of you who will be lucky enough shortly to see the announcements of the awards, well done indeed in all the categories. It's been heartening to see some of the fantastic and the great work that has been done. Apart from that, let me now give you 20 minutes of your day back to you. I'm just going to keep the channel open, please, WA, just for any of those people who wish to also add their thanks and a happiness to Alison for the award. And we will drop off shortly, but have a great afternoon, have a great remainder of the week, and look forward to seeing you before too long. Hopefully we can get together in the regular way. As far as the conference is concerned, next year, November 22, under current plans, we would almost certainly hope to come back together again. And for those of you who only get out once a year, we'll look forward to seeing you at Welland Road, probably in November 22. But for now, thank you very much indeed. I'll leave the chat tote open, and I'm closing down my video now. Thanks very much. Bye-bye for now.